Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. And today's episode is a ripper. We have got two amazing transformation stories to share with you. The first one showing you that not all lifestyle design is measured in dollars, Ben. What else do we cover?
And Bryce, we've got the second case study which talks about the hidden costs of get-rich-quick schemes. So avoid those. And finally, Bryce, in What's Making Property News, we will reveal the number one demographic that's active in the investor space across Australia in this episode.
Ooh, the number one demographic, folks. You got to check that out. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast and welcome back to you too, Ben. How are you?
Hi, mate. I thought we definitely want to talk footy this week. The Freo are back on the W side of the ledger. We want to talk. We want to talk shop.
Let's see if they string a few together, mate. Let's even the sun shines on a cat's every now and then. So we'll see. We're talking about consistency. But hey, last week's episode seemed to strike a chord, Ben.
Yep.
Bit of feedback. Obviously had Jennifer Langton on, talking about the 3 stages of retirement, which is really good, and hopefully a bunch of Gen Xers in particular, but it applies to everyone. Really thought, maybe that's something that I should be thinking about. But I got this message on my Instagram, Ben, and it said,
yes.
This is from Curtis M. I'm just listening to the current podcast. I just handled the bills to help my wife out. I was in another room. I called her and go, if I died, would you be able to handle the bills and stuff? Her reply was, I don't even know how to pay my rego. Thanks to this conversation, I'm going to change that. Because you remember the bit where we talked about the traditional generations of some of the people that are in retirement now? Curtis was, just casually said, hey, look, I'll handle this, you handle that. We got this covered. But that conversation started to change the narrative. So I reckon that's a win, Ben. If we're having conversations that are changing narratives in households, we're trying to change narratives around people having conversations about money, not making it taboo. And if we're changing narratives where, hey, look, everyone should be on the same page and have an understanding, I think that's a double win.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I've told my story about my brother losing his fiancée suddenly, and she was the bookkeeper. She did all of the ran the household, and so Jeremy was not necessarily in the best shape to do that at the time, but also things still had to happen, right? Bills still needed to be paid, electricity still needed to be kept on, and all of those other things. So it took us months to get everything organised, so he could get on top of things in terms of how the household was managed. So I think it is always helpful to have some understanding or knowledge, or at least know where the information is kept. And that these days includes passwords and all of those other things. So, password managers are really helpful in terms of doing all that type of stuff because, everything's pretty much digitized or online these days. So, from the MyGov that we need to do right through to, sort of logging in and paying bills through our banking apps and so forth. So, definitely helpful to have some understanding of how the finances operate inside a household.
Yeah, and I think even with my own parents, I've noticed too the shift where Dad was always, he had it lined up, he had his files, and Mum didn't know any of it, whereas now we've started to change that narrative so that she's understanding what that looks like. And I think I was, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. For me, I was very traditional seeing that. And before I met my wife, I was a property investor, so I was already managing all that sort of things. But now it's swung. Like Andrea manages the properties and the portfolio and everything now, which is great. So she's fully across it. So there's been 2 phases in our relationship / marriage where that's definitely changed. So good on you, Curtis, for being so transparent there, and good on you for the just the authenticity at the end. Just saying, well, this conversation is going to change, and I'm going to make a difference around what that looks like. So that's good. Hey,
Start and build, right? Start and build going out to Curtis?
It's beautiful. Love it, Ben. Reach out to, he's going to reach out to me on Instagram, and then I'm going to go, so Curtis, if you just reach out to info@thepropertycouch.com.au, and we'll make sure that's available to you, which is good. Hey, our TPC survey, Ben, we have been getting a lot of feedback from our community. We are the People's Podcast, and we want to make sure we're delivering the content to the people that really want it. So, we're in the process of digesting that. I think, Ben, we're at the 11:59 on that.
We just want to thank everyone for who's submitted. But if you go on there and the survey's still there and you haven't basically filled it in, but you want to give us some of that feedback, it might still be up. That's all we can say.
There's a little insider secret for everyone, right? I think it's closed. But if you action it right now as you're listening to this, as this episode comes out, you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/tell us. I reckon there's a very small window where you can let us know, which is good. But we've been getting some feedback. I've been having a look at some of the responses, Ben. We haven't fully deep dived because it's starting to close off now. But one of those things that we've known for people are giving us feedback is, interestingly, Ben, a lot of people have said don't talk about the footy. That's who we are, isn't it? It's part of our DNA. Just talk about the footy. But the second thing is they want to hear more case studies of people and the decisions. So we're actually doing that today. We're going through a couple of case studies, and we've got some meta themes around what those case studies look like, because it's easy to think when you're trying to create wealth or independence or financial freedom or whatever the buzzword that you want to talk about. We call it lifestyle by design, Ben.
Yep.
It's easy to focus on the dollars and just the numbers, but there is a whole range of differences for people's lives and what their sliding door moments and all that sort of stuff. And I think what I'm most excited about unpacking in the two case studies that we're going to talk to today are some of those sliding door moments and some of those decisions that people are making, and what does that look like. And hopefully for people, definitely stick around, because a lot of these decisions that people are making are not just dollars decisions. There's some bigger decisions at play here, which is really, really good. So stick around for that. And just a reminder that, Ben, I've been getting a lot of people reaching out to me via Instagram with questions. So thank you for those. I will put them into upcoming episodes. It's not too late to go to SpeakPipe on our website. I'd actually prefer to hear your voice. So if you want to leave me a message via voice on Instagram, that can be done. Or go to SpeakPipe. We can do that, which will be good. Hey, my Mindset Minute theme today, Ben, is talking about the basics, right? So there's a guy by the name of Grant Mayo. He founded the Nutrition Warehouse supplement stores. I was recently listening to his story on a podcast. So here's the stats: 550 staff, $170 million in revenue, 111 stores. And he was asked the question, do you feel bad spending money on yourself? And he said, yes, I don't like to waste it. Right. So if you think about just that level of business acumen and success, and his answer is, I don't like to waste it. And he goes, my mum taught me a lot. She said, there's wants and needs. Do you want it or do you need it? If you want it, think about it for a couple of days. If you still want it after that, go and get it. If you need it, like a washing machine, then go and buy it. And he goes, that has stuck with me. And I reckon there's something in that for all of us. We've talked about needs and wants over the journey, Ben. But the more simple that we can put it into people's minds when they're at the point of decision, because it's all good having a theory, but it's that point when you're about to tap, or it's that point when that emotion or adrenaline starts to kick in. If you can actually have a framework that you can have as a mental model, do I want this or do I need it? Need it? Okay, different category, different lane. If I want it, let's just sit on it for a couple of days, for a few days. And then after that, if after the initial adrenaline and excitement of that purchase still exists and you want it and you've got the ability to go and get it, and Ben, it's part of your money smarts and you've made the decision that it's not going to affect your future, then go ahead and get it. But simple wisdom from someone who has a lot of money, Ben, and still has the same message that mum taught about wants and needs, even though from the outside looking in, money doesn't seem to be an issue for this particular individual. So
I love it, Bryce, and we've actually heard this sort of message many times on some series and when we're interviewing people about, sort of what was money like growing up. And we've had some great tips along the journey of that similar nature. Like, I think I'm trying to remember who it was, but, they said sleep on it. So a lot of money mistakes are made with impulse buying. Excuse me. So impulse buying is when you're out and about and you set yourself a budget to go and buy something, and all of a sudden you find something that's a little bit more fancier, a little bit better, costs, a third more of what you were willing to pay, but all of a sudden you have, this emotional response and you do an impulse buy. And that's a lot of money that's being wasted over time. And I think part of my success in terms of not making too many mistakes over the journey is I really have never been an impulse buyer. I've never, I've always been a considered buyer, similar to Grant, in the sense that I actually think about it to sort of say, does it keep coming up before I actually decide that I want to buy something? It's probably still why I have a 2010 car, Bryce. So, the car that I've got gets me from A to B. Do I need another car? Do I need to have all the bells and maybe one day soon, we'll upgrade the car, but right now they're the examples of sensible purchasing versus wants versus needs.
So Ben, we're not, we've got our office in North Melbourne, and there's a dealership down the road, Nick Theodosi. It's a prestige car dealership. It says everyone should own a prestige car once in their lifetime. Do you reckon you'll ever fall for that marketing pitch?
So the answer is when I'm retired comfortably, maybe. I mean, but I have that choice. I have that luxury of do I want to scratch the itch? My initial thought though, Bryce, is I'll just hire it for a week.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'll get it out of my system and then I'll give it back, because most of the time it's going to be sitting in the garage, or I'm going to be worried where I park it if someone's going to key it, or I'd have all of those other worries that attach to it. So I'd much prefer to have an experience with the car and then give it back.
I'm with you, mate. A good mate of mine, who Matt, just went over to the States, and he rented a Porsche from, where did he start? I think he went from LA down to San Diego, right? I might have got that geography wrong. But he had it for 3 days, loved it, but gave it back, right? And it was just bank the experience. And so I guess if anyone's listening to this podcast and they're looking for inspiration for cars, they're not going to get it from us, because you drive a 2010 VW and I drive a tradies van, a Hi-Ace, so I can put bikes and surfboards in the back. So we're probably not the not the podcast for flash cars. I do have a weakness for a Aston Martin DBS one day, but there is no rush in any shape or form for that, because I'm like you. I get sort of practical around scratching. Where do I park it? All that sort of stuff. So, there you go. But I'd like to have it as an experience at some stage. I'm sure we will. Hey, today's first case study, just so people know, 2 things. One, we want to thank our team has gone out. So these are real people, real backstories, real situations, real decisions they were facing. But we want to keep them anonymous, Ben. So first of all, we want to say thanks to the clients who said yes, right? First of all. 2, by anonymizing it, that means that someone can't come up to them and say, hey, I heard your story, number 1. Number 2, they're really brave. And the motivation for them to come on and do this is so that they can actually use their story to help others. So just want to honour those people that have done that. But so today we're talking about a story. The first one is James and Becky, Ben. Not their real names, surprisingly, Ben, but their real age of 42 and 33. And one of our senior expert property investment advisors here, Polly Chu, has been working with this client, and it's got a really, really cool story. So the theme of this case study, so what I'll do, Ben, is I'll set the scene and then you and I stop and riff on it, okay? But the theme is that not all lifestyle design is measured in dollars. So I want people to think that as we sort of work through this story, that not all lifestyle design is measured in dollars, and that'll make a ton more sense shortly. But in terms of the backstory, first of all, James is a long-distance truck driver, 16-hour days, spends Monday to Friday on the road, and only has the weekend at home, often leaving on Sunday evenings, given the prep for that. So, and then the tax is, okay, I'm home on Saturday, but just exhausted. I mean, when you're doing those sorts of clicks and doing those sorts of hours and doing that sort of responsibility with the loads that you're carrying, I can't imagine what that's like, Ben. I live an hour and a quarter away from the big smoke, and if I have to drive up and back 2 days in a row, I'm like, oh gosh. So you can imagine just doing that all the time, long term, right? And then his wife, Becky, works at a local newsagent, is at home doing all things domestic engineering with the school pickup and drop-offs, and supporting the family admirably whilst Joe's away. So very, very busy at home with the family and the kids. So They have a principal place of residence, and they're paying it down. So Ben, so far, setting the scene, just typical people
Yep.
out there navigating certain stuff.
How many kids, Bryce? How many kids?
They have 2 kids, 3 kids, Ben, 12,
3 kids?
9,
Yep.
and 5.
Beautiful.
So here's the problem, okay? James is very, very grateful for what Becky does for the family, right? But he's had a couple of divorces, right? From being away so much, and doesn't want this one to be like that. So how's that for recognizing, what's happened in the past, and then straightening up and going, hey, look, I don't want my past to be a predictor of my future. I love that. So he wants to be able to spend more time with the family, as I mentioned, 12, 9, and 5, those 3 kids.
Yeah.
And would even like to consider changing to week on, week off, right? But here's the challenge with that. If James was to do that, the overtime and allowance would drop by, Ben, wait for it, $42,000 a year.
It's a big hit.
It's a big hit, right? So you can see the dilemma. We can just stop and pause
Yeah.
there. Someone actually has this lifestyle by design desire and this practical reality of wanting to make ends meet, which means that if I serve the master of lifestyle design right now, it comes at the cost of $42,000. It's a big call, Ben.
Yeah, it's a huge trade-off, Bryce. And I think, at the end of the day, in terms of James's skill set, he's very experienced at what he does. He's obviously, truck drivers, safe and reliable. They're the sort of key traits and components that you want in your sort of workers. But at 16-hour days, right? That's long haul, lots of traveling, those types of things. Now, the trade-off is if I can't go and find gainful employment that's going to give me that type of financial reward, but I've got 3 kids and a wife who's also working sort of part-time at the news agency, there's going to be a trade-off. And the big trade-off there is I've got a mortgage to pay, and I've obviously, got to build a lifestyle for the family as well. So that's a big call. And 42,000 in, this current standard where we've got higher inflation and higher living costs, that's material. So in a way, James is not so much absolutely caught in this environment, but there's a really strong magnet that's pulling him into that particular situation. And so he's got to embrace it, because the more that he tries to push against it, that's going to affect his mental health, and it's going to affect how he works. So embrace the fact that he's got this gainful employment and it's working well and it's providing for the family, and then seeing what it's going to do. As with the plan we're about to unpack, this is the exciting bit of what that money is able to achieve for the family. So I think it's a really good story, and it sets up nicely in terms of understanding the positives that come from the sacrifice that James is making.
Yeah, and people can reflect on what is my version of the dilemma that James is feeling right now. What decision do I want to make where I'm on the line? Or if I make that, it comes at the cost of something else that is causing some fear, right? So that was the very thing that was going on for James. Okay, that 42,000. How does that actually impact their ability to pay down their home, right? So there is equity in their home. So they were wondering, is now actually the best time to invest in property with it? So a couple of extra things. Doesn't want to be driving a truck at 60 years old, number one. So they wanted to plan for retirement but needed some help. So here's the deal. This is what I love. James started listening to the TPC, to the podcast, and reading books, including MMSA, Make Money Simple Again, and implemented Money Smarts. And then so Becky was on board. So how good's that? So you're in a situation, you're in the car, you're in the truck. So using that as Zig Ziglar used to always call it automobile university back in the day when it was cassette tapes, Ben, when I was putting cassette tapes in my little Mazda 323, I was driving to uni. So it's automobile university. So he's able to use that. And so here's the deal. Here we are in May of 2024. But James found the property couch in October 23. So what's our maths there, Ben? It's probably about 7 months ago. Not only started listening, but took action, right? So from the point of actually being introduced to the point of actually taking action is actually probably below average, I would have thought, because a lot of people still spend a lot of time, absorbing, taking in the information, but not actually taking that first step, which is actually the most challenging part. Yeah,
and I've obviously been privileged to have a look at the plan that's been built by Polly, and also have a look at their information on the More platform. And I'm really, thrilled for looking at the way in which they're using money smarts, and they're actually smashing it, Bryce. If I have a look at basically where their current situation is in terms of anticipated surplus income, and though they're well above the line, and we talk about swimming between the flags, they're on the positive side of the flags.
Yeah.
So that is a huge effort for them. And there's also some exciting new features that we've built into more, such as the offset loan tracker, right? So effectively now you can connect all of your offset accounts and you can see them on the insights charts on the mortgage. So every time you then update the balances of your offset account or the mortgage, you can actually see the impact that it's making, and you can see then what your net debt is against each of those loans. So another great little tool that we've added literally this week in terms of on the platform, as we continue to keep providing these insight tools to help people see the progress that they're making, so they can then continue with building those new habits. And that's exactly what James and Becky are trying to do here. Their financial literacy was at the lower end, and they're moving it higher on that journey. And I think that is credit to them in terms of understanding how that works. And we're just going to continue to keep providing those insights along the journey, so they can see the progress that they're making, which means that they'll continue to keep maintaining those habits.
Yeah, and it is a source of pride for us, because it's a platform that we built to use for ourselves. But then had a mate send me ping me a little note the other day. I introduced him to it, and he's starting to put the data in. He's sending me screenshots and videos, and he's just saying this is amazing. So it's kind of nice that we get to build out this tool that effectively is for if you break it down, Ben, it's for you and me as property investors, and then everyone else gets to have a swing with it as well. So. So that's the external obvious stuff that was going on for James and Becky. But here's the internal questions that no one actually gets to see when you're seeing these people. And the number one question was, how do we do it, right? Not sure how we do it. And at the time, lacking knowledge and being very time poor, didn't know where to start, right? Yeah. So they're common traits and common themes that a lot of people can go through. So, but here's the epiphany. Here's the penny drop moment that happened at some point. That they both James and Becky self-confessed didn't have the financial literacy growing up, but having access to the materials opened their eyes that investing, here's the beautiful part, investing isn't just for rich people, and that they can make a change towards their future and pass these really strong financial habits onto their 3 kids. And make a difference for their family. Andrew and I, my wife and I, talk about generational change all the time. You get to be the pivot point where you can actually look up and see your family tree and go, oh, that's the way it's always been. Or you get this point to go, no, actually, I'm going to actually break the chain. I'm going to change the belief of that and be the catalyst of change for the family tree that goes before you. And there's actually more on that a bit later on for this story. But that's a really good aha moment that they both went through, that it's not just for rich people. I love hearing that, and it irritates us enormously when the perception of property investors is that it's all just for greedy, rich fat cats. Did I get that right?
That's good enough. I think we understand your flavour. We understood the flavour.
But it sounded a bit clustery when I dropped it out. But it is actually statistically more likely to be the person living next door to you trying to have a swing than it is to be someone who's stereotypically the guy from Wall Street. What was his name? Gordon Gekko. Gordon Gekko. Greed is good.
Yeah, that's right. Greed is good. Yep.
So there we go. That was the epiphany. So here's the plan, Ben, and chime in at any time. I'll just get the details out, and then we might do some commentary around it. Sure. But here was the plan. After going through the conversation around having all that backstory, having a conversation with Polly, digesting all of that into, okay, what is it that makes a difference for you, lifestyle by design? Here's the exciting part, Ben. I think everyone listening to this will be super excited by this, that the first port of call was to transition James to week on, week off arrangement, so he's more time at home, by July 2024, i.e. soon, Ben. Yeah. Let's just pause and reflect on that. Like, gone from, I don't know how to avoid a third divorce, to here's a believable plan on how you can actually get some of your physical energy back, not just be totally exhausted on Saturday. And as you'll see, one of the goals is to continue to pay off the mortgage, get that clear, clarity around being able to do that. Oh, geez, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when James realised that.
Well, I think this is where you make the invisible visible, Bryce, where you can see the models and you can see, well, once we've worked out what our regular spending is, and then we've got our provisional spending or our irregular spending, and we can see the buffer that we've been able to create, but we're also positive over that time and we're still paying off the debt to the point that we will find out in a minute in terms of when James and Becky get to retire. So yes, it does obviously delay retirement, but wait a minute. What have I got? I've got in terms of kids, I've got a 12-year-old, 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. I won't get to see them grow up. So the trade-off is enormous in terms of the upside as opposed to the financial reward. So if I can still retire in my 60s, and we'll find out, we'll reveal that in a minute, and still live off a good, comfortable income in retirement, but actually get a bit of my life back, thinking that I'm a grind to the road, where I have to basically work Sunday night till get home late Friday and then really just get the one full day off, which is my recovery day before I'm on. Now, potentially I can have, maybe even if it's half a week to start with or a full week, it's now available to them to be thinking about that. As long as they stick to their disciplined spending, that's going to be a thing. This is a really exciting story for them.
Oh, it's so exciting. So I'm going to rewind back to the opening statement we made, Ben, was that not all lifestyle design is measured in dollars, right? So we had a trade-off of 42,000, not actually knowing if we could actually go week on, week off. So the clarity that was given here to James and to Becky, of course, is that could actually happen. So I just absolutely love that. And here's the other part. The plan was to buy 2 investment properties, not 4, not 10, not 12, not renovate, not redevelop, not subdivide, just buy 2 passive, established investment properties. One in 2028. Hold the phone, Ben. Not now in 2024. We'll get back to that shortly. One in 2028 for today's equivalent of $600,000. In 4 years' time, it'll be worth more. We just talk about present value, but when we actually make the decision, it's in future value. And then the second one is in 2030 for $550,000. All right, with a slightly higher yield. So what does that do, Ben, in terms of retirement? It means that James can go part-time at 60 and then fully retire at 67, with Becky being able to do it at 58. Week on, week off, see more of the kids, partly retire at 60, fully retire at 67, and I think importantly, make a very, very important strategic tactical step towards making sure it doesn't have a third divorce. Just a really good way to set up this story.
Yeah, I mean, passive income of $90,000, which is $1,730 per week. Now, by that stage, you've got to be thinking the kids would be leaving home. So really, what other we've got savings there anyway. That's potentially going to help in terms of paying it forward and building legacy and training the kids' habits in terms of this is how it looks to be financially secure, financial freedom. This is what financial freedom looks like. All of those things, bode really, really well for that story. Now, in terms of double clicking on this idea that they wanted to be debt free on the family home is one of the levers that they're playing with. So they're ultimately making a decision around risk and adjusting that risk, and also the trade-off in their mind is more time with family. And I think that's a very healthy trade-off for those people who find that really important for them.
Well said, Ben. So we talked about 2028 being the first investment property 4 years away. Let's unpack a little bit about that. So first of all, just for clarity, for anyone listening to this, Ben, James and Becky had equity in their home and they had cash flows that allowed them to buy an investment property right now. So to your point you just said there, had equity, had cash flow, could buy right now, right? But they were on track to fully offset their home by 2028. And here's where the narrative starts to sort of take shape for the people listening. Why wouldn't you go ahead right now? Well, due to James's mental health challenges, they both decided as a family unit, as part of their lifestyle by design goals, not around financial, that it was more important for them to have their home paid off and get that peace of mind and the reduced anxiety for the family before taking on risks for more investing. Now, you and I can sit here, Ben, and go, time is the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett talks about compounding, but it's also real life we're talking about here, and we're talking about people being able to put their head on the pillow with both eyes closed. So it's not good enough to have to buy into the concept of time and compounding and put your head on the pillow and have one eye open. That's not the game here. So back to our meta narrative. Some lifestyle by design is measured in non-financial terms. So that's essentially what we did here. So Polly absorbed that, took on board that feedback, and resisted the temptation to project her needs onto this particular couple by saying, let's buy now, because it wasn't what suited them best. And that's really, really important. So $600,000 will be more expensive in 2028. So by the time they actually come to execute on it, they will be paying more. Here's the important part, because they had clarity, they looked at their numbers and they looked over the hill, their targets and numbers projections still worked, enabled them to get the end goal. The North Star was fine. So it helped them still make that decision. So that's important. And that plan, just for a couple of little side takeaways here, they can still enjoy life along the way. Included a $35,000 renovation to put in a pool, and importantly, Ben, helping their kids buy their first cars with gifts at their 21st birthday. So there's a lot to digest there and unpack.
Yeah, well, it's a classic case of this is real life. Like ultimately, you want to give your kids a leg up. So maybe going 50-50 on a car. They get a part-time job, but by the time they're 18, they'll match dollar for dollar on the car, and that just gets them their mobility and starts to give them their independence, so they can start to really build out that story. There's one thing I want to make sure that we talk about in here, and that is this whole concept of risk profiling and getting alignment around what that looked like. So we saw James's mental health was playing into that. Again, when you're driving, maybe a VW with, that's two trailers behind a semi on a big road, and you're responsible for your life and other people's lives on the road, being really clear and conscious and in the moment is potentially going to save lives. So we want all of our truck drivers with a healthy state of mind. So, in terms of James's ability to be clear, focused, and have clarity around that is really important. But we also are discovering that both James and Becky are on a financial literacy journey. And we do know through all of our own experiences with the thousands of clients that we've helped, but also it's throughout the financial services literature, is that over time, our risk profiles do change. And they change predominantly if things are compounding steadily over time, then our risk profile gets a little bit more comfortable. And then potentially we might get a little bit more comfortable with changing up the strategy, and that's completely fine. But we also know that if there's been a significant event on the downside, then that can kill our confidence and certainly reduce our risk profiling because of that recency experience. So we call that recency bias in terms of how that changes our behaviours and our attitudes and can really knock the confidence away. And case study number 2 today, we'll talk more about that. But this is just a good example of what you were saying before about Polly not projecting what we think is best practice. We could show you that you could make more money. We could show you that you could retire earlier if you acted now. But it's about going on that journey, and it's their journey, not ours. And ultimately, as a trusted advisor, that's your job. Your job is to try and make the risk feel comfortable. So debt-free on the family home before we start taking any more risks. More work-life balance is also the payoff in terms of what that story looks like. So I think from mine, it's a really nice story to sort of say this is a tailored solution specifically for James and Becky and their family. And that's what if you think about what is the perfect job of financial services or people who are property investment advisors, is to find that perfect solution for every customer that you're dealing with and every household that you're dealing with. And this is a beautiful case study of that particular example.
Yeah, and our flagship of $2,000 a week is not for everyone, Ben. That's why we put 1,730. They're going after 90,000, and that was sufficient in what they needed and what they wanted. So for some people, it's 90. For some people, we've done plans where they stoked summer series on 30,000 passive income.
Yeah.
Ben. So the number doesn't matter. We're just trying to create a narrative for people to go, okay, that's what we're going to aim for, 2,000. Some people come in so they want to aim for 2,000. Some people can do 3, 4, 5. and
Yep.
some people can only do 1 or 1.5, or in this case 17:30. It's fine.
It is
It doesn't matter
completely
what
fine.
it is as long as you get what you want. So here's a couple of things for the people at home to understand how this came into fruition. Right? Number one, they had an initial conversation with Polly before Christmas and engaged in the conversation before Christmas, even though some of the work started in later in February. The reason I wanted to point that out, Ben, is because there's a lesson. They took action when most people leave it to, in inverted commas, next year. And the next year comes and momentum happens. It's actually being able to start and then just take that first step, even if it means, okay, we've started, done the first thing. Christmas comes and goes. We do the adjustment. We blow out the cobwebs of public holidays and any breaks we're taking up to Australia Day. But it means once we're in February, we got momentum. We're already moving, rather than saying, oh, should we kick that off again? Should we start again? That's number one. Number two, they were both on the same page. James and Becky were both on the same page. What a beautiful privilege it is when you are in a relationship where you are both on the same page, because we've seen plenty of scenarios where, and there's probably some people listening to this now, where one's driving and one's not interested. One's driving and one's actually not encouraging at all, and actually, in fact, probably discouraging in some cases. So if you are that person, we feel for you. Ben and I are privileged enough to be in supportive relationships where we are on the same page. In this case, James and Becky are also the same. So that's important. I want to stop and acknowledge that. Two, that the whole end-to-end process from saying, yes, let's make some action, to being in a position where they can execute, 8 weeks, 2 months, Ben. So there's a bit of work. We're summarising the highlights reel, but behind the scenes, it takes some work to identify what some of these anxieties are, to work out what's important, to work out what are the obstacles that we need to overcome. Polly also did some meetings on Saturdays, because that was the only time that James was free. Now, our team, generally speaking, have commitments to their own families as well on the weekends. So we do, a lot of night work. But on the weekends, we try as best we can to quarantine for our team to have the time with their family as well. But in this case, Polly was so invested in the outcome here that she did. This was one thing she flagged with me, that she was really, really keen. She was emotionally invested into helping them. So was inspired to help them get out of that lifestyle. So that's one thing to think about. There was lots to digest, as the decision to delay that investment property number one was not an easy one, and it actually took some time. But it was important to ensure, what we've talked about, that Polly was able to risk profile what's important to them, what is it what they need, not what is it what we need. They refinanced some of their existing loan, and they continued with Money Smart. So, but here's the deal. Now what you have is, when you have a North Star, you have these check-in points. So the plan gives them targets. So that's what we're heading towards, 2028, 2030. But it also allows you to know what you're actually aiming for in terms of a big goal for them is to fully offset their mortgage, which was super, super important for not only their own financial goals, but their own health goals as well. So that's how they took action, Ben. So there was a fair bit in that.
Yeah, I think, and the 36-month cash flow forecast that they would have also got is a really nice program of work that will show them heading towards that 2026, 2028 timeframes, and working through that. So, and again, as they build confidence, their situation and confidence might make them go a little bit earlier. We just don't know. But the best part about the model is we've looked at their most comfortable case. And so as they, again, build that financial literacy, we'll see where that takes them on that particular journey. So the end result from an achievement point of view is they'll have their family home paid off by 2028. They'll have financial freedom, the $90,000 in passive income by 2048. There'll be retirement in 2048 at the age of 67 for James and 58 for Becky. In terms of net worth, again, this is the power of compounding indexation that goes on here, 7.8 million. Nest egg, 5.2 million, and nest egg in present value terms. So if you bring that back in today's dollar terms, a very, very healthy 2.9 million if these projections do come to fruition. So it's nice to know. I mean, there's no guarantee, never is, right? There's, lots of navigating to do. But just to know, to your point, Bryce, the North Star is is plausible. And so we've just got to keep, unless you're using a driving analogy, got to keep on trucking in terms of getting towards that particular point. And I really love, what's happening here for James and Becky.
So that's the obvious results, Ben. The not so obvious results to anyone who's not close to the story is it was a way to cut back James's overtime, which was impacting his mental health, physical energy, and family time. Tick, done. The Becky and the family benefit, tick, done. Removed the anxiety that they can reach the North Star, Ben, without having to have honky nuts and tomato sauce along the way, so they could have some life along the way, and it gave them a really clear path forward. Which will set them up for success, not only for James and for Becky. Remaining married is the goal here. Paying off their home is the goal here. Passing on financial literacy to the kids is the goal here, which is exciting. So here's a couple of wrap-up notes that we got from Polly, just to add a little bit of icing to the story. Number one, doesn't mean you have to buy property straight away. I think we covered that as well. So we really wanted them to be able to sleep well at night, which leads into there's no right or wrong answer. We use the analogy of Google Maps in the business, Ben, and it's basically if I want to go from where I am in Torquay and I want to drive home to Perth, I can put in Google Maps, but it usually gives me the fastest, but it also gives me two other alternatives which consider other things. And that's pretty much how we define what we do. We can show you the fastest, we can show you the coast road, we can show you the most scenic, we can show you the road that stops in to visit the family and relatives along the way. But what is universal across every plan is where we are, where we start and where we want to ends up in the same A to B, but the way we get there is entirely tailored and different. So that's fine. The Money Smarts changed their financial literacy, so they were really grateful to have read those books. And this is lifestyle design 101, right? We got an income, we got all hit the beats, first cars, 21st, enjoying experiences along the way. But here's the final point we want to do. Now James tells his dad what to do with his money, right? This is the change in financial literacy. He is now the financial guidance to the family tree above, not just the family tree below. He's dad's advisor now, which is just an incredible transformation, incredible story. So got rid of all the bad money habits, transformed their story, and changed family tree. So James and Becky, well done on taking action. And we are certainly excited. Come bring on July, Ben, when week on, week off for driving trucks for James becomes a reality, which is super cool.
So it's a brilliant story all around. So I just can't wait for them to basically live out their plan, because that's the journey they're on right now. So it's a really exciting proposition for them, and they should be acknowledged firstly for taking action. Like ultimately, you talk about that pre-Christmas commitment, but that is a significant action backed by a significant mindset shift of saying it is possible for us. And we're going to make sure we leave no stone unturned to see out this particular plan. So congratulations to both of them.
Yeah, congratulations, absolutely. And a little shout out to Polly for being super invested in making sure that happens. So the next one is we're going to chat with Billy about Billy and Kylie. No surprises, Ben. It's not Billy and Kylie. We changed their names, but 43 and 41. This is from another one of our senior advisors, Stu Bartram. And there was a lot to really love and unpack about this story too. But here's the meta theme. If the meta theme on the first one, Ben, was not all lifestyle design is measured in dollars, the meta theme for this particular story is getting a look under the bonnet on the true price. And I say price not just in dollar terms, Ben, but the true price of get-rich-quick schemes. And this story is really going to detail that in some length. So let's rip in, just so we get to know these people. Billy and Kylie live in New South Wales. They're in their 40s. They've got two kids, 9 and 7. And Billy runs a litigation business. Okay, here's the problems for the story that we want to tackle. Okay, first of all, circa 2013, Billy did a property development in a mining town. Pause for effect, and it went badly. So he did a property development in a mining town that didn't go so well. So after buying it, getting council approval, the plans drawn, They were in the knockdown stage, and the bank pulled the pin on the lending due to the market falling out. Ben, outside of their control. That's the worst bit. Imagine if you got the funding, you did the development, and then you actually realised the loss. Okay, but you weren't even able to get that far because the bank changed the parameters that you were working with. So Billy then had to sell the contract, and there was a huge loss of $500,000, folks.
Mate, $500,000, that's $500,000. So it's really, really challenging to be able to mentally come back from something like that. I mean, it would put a lot of pressure on the relationship. That's also true. Now, Bryce, just as I'm talking, you might hear that next door neighbours are doing a bit of construction work at the moment. So you might hear a bit of drilling as part of the audio on this particular pod, but we can't do anything about it. So we're just going to push on.
Yeah, the studio is pretty soundproof, but not when a jackhammer's going. But just kind of a juxtaposition, Ben. So anyone who's building these plans, they don't have to go into any development phase of their plan. It's all passive. But yeah, no, thanks for letting us know about that background noise. But 500,000 is, let's be honest. Imagine just reflect, and if you're listening to this, just losing $100,000 would sting massively. So 5 times that is a lot. So they had some cash. At the time, 6 figures of cash, around 100K, but that was not nearly enough. So what happened is Billy and Kylie had to sell their home. So they lost everything. And then not only did they lose everything, it took 6 years for them to get back into the property market and buy the new home. So reflect on that, folks. To feel Billy and Kylie's pain, not only do you have to acknowledge the pain of what went on, but then you have to be reminded of it for over half a decade of that mistake. So there would be a sense of self that would be burning in here for Billy, and he reflected that he got caught up in the hype when attending seminars and tried to get rich quick, and this is his biggest single regret. Ben, do you know when you get those memes or those podcast references where someone says, here I interviewed people who were dying, and here's their top 5 regrets, and I put all their 5 regrets. It's kind of like this one here is obviously not as profound as dying, so let's be clear, but it gives you that opportunity to look in the rear vision mirror and go, this is my single biggest regret when it comes to investing, that I got caught up in a get-rich-quick scheme, which is why we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of hundred episodes saying we're a get-rich-slow opportunity rather than a get-rich-quick. But $500,000 large just because of that hype.
So, Bryce, this is a challenging story all around, right? So you've got a situation where Billy's, thinking about making the right decision. He's seeing proof of it in the seminars and all of the, sort of social media profiles and videos that are coming out. This is how much profit I made. And so this is a pathway to success. And very, very often you see young investors always being seduced by quick wins and quick returns. Whereas, for you and I, it's not our first rodeo. In fact, we've done 3 decades of rodeoing in this particular space. We know that it's always going to pretty much move back to the regression to the mean, right? So if we keep that principle going, we've got a situation where if you also think about investment returns, the higher the risk, so risk-adjusted returns, the higher the risk you take, the better the returns are, but that's the trade-off. I mean, ultimately, in terms of Billy considering this opportunity, and I can really sympathise with Billy's situation because it was the bank who pulled the rug. So he might have done all of his numbers, but not being able to get access to that debt was a real critical element for him. And so I think, the way in which I look at that is that, reconciling that was taken out of his control. So it wasn't ultimately just him, but also then by owning it, he's really now started to see that he can move on. If he continued to have a challenge with that and not own it, so by basically making and owning it is allowed him to move on. And now we're about to tell a really nice, sort of a sunrise moment after a really dark period, because they end up losing their house, and that's the house of cards falling. When you take on too much debt and you get too greedy in the property market, you can ultimately force that whole deck of cards down. Now, I'm not saying that that's Billy and Kylie's example. all I'm just basically talking about there is, don't be too when you want to be greedy, make sure you've got some financial stability behind you and only risk a small portion. Never risk the entire farm, because ultimately that's what can happen. And that was an unfortunate event for Billy and Kylie.
Well, in Billy and Kylie's story, obviously we're talking about the dark side of their story, but there is definitely bright side, which is the point, right? Which is the point of what we're talking about here. But there was a couple of unknown things, unknown problems that were happening. The business was distracting them from their personal finances. So in the planning process, they weren't super clear on incomes, the type and amount from the business. So Stu had to encourage them to call the accountant and confirm what's pay as you go, what's business drawings. So there was a bit of a blind spot around that. So that was important to get some clarity, but also having line of sight and detail on their current loans. So what was the type of loan? Was it an offset versus redraw? What was the balance outstanding? How much was in offset? It was sort of reshifting their focus back to those basics, because that's part of cleaning house, right? And this, the team, and in chatting with Stu, he sees it a lot. He sees a lot of plans, right? So it's not uncommon for business owners who are focused on their business to have a bit of dilution, murky waters around what's business and what's personal. I think if you can get that delineation between business and personal, I think that's really important. And I wonder, as I was talking to Stu and reflecting on Billy and Kylie, when you've had an event like that's a traumatic event. When you lose your home, and then that puts relationship under stress, it's trauma, right? And so I wonder what sort of coping mechanisms were being employed here. And I reckon it could have been easy for Billy to go, well, it was my call that got us here, so therefore I'm just going to do whatever it takes. And you could easily just devote to the business, do whatever it takes. One, as a way to focus on getting back what's lost, but two, as a distraction as well, Ben, from some of the pain that comes from experiencing these real life events that people have some shame around and some guilt. And I'm sure the challenges that it does put on relationships is real. And so I just want to send a note to Billy that, mate, we get you. We get that you're having a swing to get ahead. It didn't work, and some of the toll that takes can have trauma impacts on us.
I think, Bryce, if I can pick up on the other part of what you were just talking about there before around when you're self-employed, you've got inconsistency in income. So a lot of the people who potentially want to invest in property, they do get quite concerned about that fluctuation in income, and so they don't take action. So what Stu was able to do for Billy and Kylie was to look at that income, sort it all out, start to get some patterns of reliable income that's in there, and then also then make some assumptions about some of the more lumpier income that might also be part of that particular story. And then once you got that, and once you got the cash flows, then it is about sort of starting to think about the optimization overlaid by the risk and confidence profiling that we talk about in this particular case, but we also talked about recently in the James and Becky situation, right? So I think there's some really nuances here that hopefully we're teaching to the community around some of the roadblocks, some of the objection points, some of the challenges, but that they are overcomeable in terms of you can overcome that type of situation in terms of what we're looking at. So where do we go to from here, Bryce?
All right, so it became really clear on what was at stake. All right, what if they got this wrong? They were really scared to make another mistake. And also they realised that they'd lost some time, to your point earlier, Ben, to be able to do this. So can't get that time back, plus scared of making mistakes. So the hard penny drop moment for them was, whilst they did have a strong borrowing capacity, they had modest cash flows. And if they wanted to make sure that they didn't repeat the sins of the past and scared not to go back and make that mistake, they really wanted to get some help. So the conclusion was a conservative approach with a long-term strategy to enjoy passive income at retirement. Ben, I really want to stop and pause here for our community. we do not get involved in hyperbole, hype. The information we've presented for almost 10 years, Ben, and the plans that we present are certainly not aggressive. They're not risky. They achieve a very simple platform for people, is to create lifestyle by design. In some cases, 2,000 a week, plus or minus. But we want to be the people out in the marketplace on the back of the rise of the financial influencers episode we did a couple of weeks ago, Ben. We want to be the voice of reason in the market that says, if you want to take overly aggressive risks, we're not the podcast to listen to. There are other podcasts that you can do that. We actually want to help our clients and our community and our people who are listening on our podcast achieve the freedom whilst getting on with life and enjoying a little bit of lifestyle by design along the way. So I think that's important. They wanted to create a conservative approach with that long-term strategy to enjoy that passive income. So let's have a look at some of the nuts and bolts. They wanted to buy a new home for 1.3 million in the future, Ben. But what became clear was this was not financially feasible after workshopping the whole idea in the planning process. And this served as a reality check because they suspected that this might be the case, but they had that validated, which meant that they could get some closure on what that looks like. They have an existing PPR. The plan was to stay in their existing PPR and not get distracted by a new PPR, which, if they're already having challenges with cash flow, Ben, if you want to have more challenges with the cash flow, upgrade your home. That's 101. Want more cash flow challenges? Get a bigger house that costs you more. So whilst they were disappointed, and given what had happened previously, they absolutely did not want to put themselves in that compromised position. So with that strong borrowing capacity of 1.3, they decided to use it for investment properties, not a principal place of residence. And even considering their adjusted risk profile, Ben, so clearly risk profile early was super aggressive. Now it's a more conservative risk profile. So they were happy to not exercise the full 1.3 borrowing capacity. They decided to exercise that at 950, which then gave birth to two scenarios, Ben.
Yeah, and I think that would also be an element of confidence in the supply of that cash flow coming in. Again, when you're in your own business, you'll have some of that lumpy cash flow that's also coming through. So I think that makes a bit of sense to sort of have a more conservative element. I mean, I pick up on your point you were saying before, Bryce, about how conservative we are. We're naturally conservative because we're playing with other people's money. Like ultimately, it's not our money, right? And so we're humbled by the opportunity to serve the people that we do the models for, because at the end of the day, we're playing with their lives. We're playing with their life savings in some cases. So that's why it is important when you run an advisory business, as opposed to commenting about the risk you take and the money you've made, and then ultimately being risky with other people's money, is where we've seen so many problems occur over the 30 odd years that we've been watching these fly by the night, fly by the seat of their pants companies come, promote big property gains, and then within 10 years, the businesses are collapsed. And obviously lots of unhappy customers behind them. So that, I think, is a really important point. So coming back to the scenario, in this particular case, this is the joy of doing modelling. So we modelled their situation in terms of age, income coming in. So we had one property, which was a 900 purchase, so a more significant asset. But then we also had two properties, one at 600 and then one at 500 later. And it was the yield that won the day for their particular situation. So remember what we said before, even though the bank would lend them more, because we did analysis on their current spending and lifestyle, that yield really mattered. And so we were able to sort of then say, okay, this year we'll buy the $600,000 property with a 6.5% growth target, 3.5% yield. And then IP number two, we'll come back for that in 2028 at a $500,000 in today's value terms, which will be extrapolated at a 4.5% compounding return. So we'll buy it at a future value in 2028 with a 4.5% growth and a 4.5% yield. So a bit of a balanced asset in terms of the importance for a cash cow, finishing off that, which means that will go to cash flow positive sooner. And then ultimately it will be about retiring that debt in a quicker manner.
Now, Ben, for those people that are discouraged in a similar situation, the good thing about this particular couple is they got back on the horse. So they bought their principal place of residence that they currently live in January 2021, right? So in prime sort of COVID times. And they've seen a very strong capital growth in a short period of time, as has anyone who's been on the property ladder during that time, which was circa 11% per annum. So that's a win. That's something that we need to bank for this couple, because they want to have these incremental psychological wins along the way, given the mental scar of the past. So that's exciting. And as you've just detailed, there's a couple of investment properties. The trade-off was around yield. I think there's a real learning point for the community here. The suggestion to buy a more expensive property versus buying two, breaking that up to buy two smaller budgeted properties was a yield thing. And it harks back to if you go back to our original 20, Ben, when we talk about buying a property that's investment grade, it's investment grade price point for the particular investor. Because if you could go to, we often talk about if you go Peppermint Grove in WA or Toorak here in Victoria, or you go to Hamilton or Ascot in Brisbane or anywhere on the lower North Shore in Sydney, you could buy properties that would significantly increase your wealth once you buy them in 2024 and what they'd be worth in 2034. But the problem is you've got to get to 2034. If you can't hold your name on those titles for the decade, doesn't matter how much they go up in value, which is why investment grade is about price point as much as it is about the bricks and mortar and the location as well. So in this is a case in point that the investment grade price point for this particular couple wasn't 900K, whereas for some others it might be 900K. So that's important learning there.
Yeah, really important. I mean, I think, you always talk about that cash flow keeps you in, growth is what you take out.
Yep.
Right. And remembering, even if we don't sell those properties in retirement, we're still taking that growth out in a sort of a theoretical way, because with that growth comes higher rental that we're able to receive for that higher value property over time. So, but in this particular case, cash flow was tied early on. And so it was a sensible decision to diversify and break up that risk, get that higher yield at that lower price point, and then ultimately, happy days in terms of how we then sail through towards our North Star to be able to land the plane in terms of retiring that debt out and ultimately living off the passive income.
Now, Ben, one of the joys that I get to do spending my week is I'm very close with our property wealth planning team, and I get to work with them as they craft the way that they have the conversations with the people that they get the privilege of serving when they come and put their hand up and say, we'd like some help. And Stu talked about this with this particular couple, because the environment that he was able to create is something I'm really proud of, where it became a safe space to talk about what had happened in the past, because sometimes healing comes from bringing the darkness into the light in a place of trust, right? And again, we've touched on this, but I really want to speak to the people who can resonate with this, who are listening. When you go through an event that this couple have gone through, there is a lot of bark that gets taken off you. You can lose your confidence, you can lose self-esteem, all the internal stuff that you don't get to see when you see these people at barbecues, when you see them out having a drink, having dinner with their friends. It's that internal chatter that's going on. So the opportunity to talk with an experienced advisor about the mistake that they made in the past, deal with that, bring it into an open environment, acknowledge it, shine the light on it that it needs to say that's part of your history, but it doesn't have to define who you are, and then we can move forward. They had a face-to-face meeting in the office with Stu, and then it gave them the opportunity to deal with that and then just move on without sort of being defined by that past. And I really love that. So they'd lost time, but they didn't want to lose any more time, because we know that that's the secret sauce. So end result, Ben, was looking pretty good for them.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if you think about what their target is, it's another story of 90,000, retiring at around 2044. So they've chosen an earlier retirement, 63 and 61. So, obviously if they kept working, that income in retirement would continue to keep magnifying and compounding. So net worth in future value terms, 7.96, nest egg 4.3 million, present value of that nest egg 2.65, debt-free by 2041. So that's a nice little story, 2 years before they enter in retirement. So that is very, very helpful. And then, which when you think about where they started from, and effectively the big step backwards that they had to take to now move multiple steps forward as part of that particular story is a really nice closing out message in terms of they've moved past the fear of that public opinion or that rejection or that fear of failure that they've had, and ultimately are now starting to think about that as much as it was, they can take it on as a massive learning lesson, but it doesn't have to define who they are. And I think that's a really powerful message for anyone who finds themselves in a situation where they've been kicked in the guts and not being able to get back up. What we've seen here with Billy and Kylie is they've stuck it together. They were very, very powerful in sticking it together, and they got out the other side. So I think that's a really nice story where they've got their principal place of residence, they've got 2 investment properties, so they've got those rocks in the jar, and that ultimately puts them in a great position.
Yeah, but here's the transformation. This was a reset strategy. This was a reset of their lifestyle by design, which is important. They got to put the past behind them, and they used that strong emotion of the previous mistake to ensure that they got the best outcome for their roadmap for the future. So remember, we talked the decision for them to not upgrade their principal place of residence was the catalyst to ensure that they got the early retirement, which was their number one goal in retirement. So, and again, you can only get clarity from doing what ifs on paper. We call it paper trading your life before actually doing it in execution. So, good story. So, in chatting with Stu, there was a couple of wrap up notes.
Can I just make one more point there, Bryce? I think it's probably also, having been in this space for many, many years myself, we shouldn't underestimate the power of getting in control of their money. So remember when Bryce was talking about the backstory there, that they really didn't know what sort of lending they had and they didn't really have a grasp of their personal financial situation. That in itself is the crux of building foundations on top of. So now they've got their finances organised, and so that should also be a huge value add as part of this story, because if you don't get your finances in order, and if you don't then work out how to have a system to manage that, then the rest will just naturally fall over, right? If you don't build it on the right foundations. And so, again, a credit to Billy and Kylie in terms of, addressing the fact that they didn't really have their finances in order. Getting those in order is going to give them the greatest chance of success.
Yeah, nice one. Very good. So Stu had these final words to say, that here are some of his observations throughout the whole planning process. At first, Billy found it hard to admit those mistakes, right? So this did mess with his sense of self and self-esteem, right? Didn't want to divulge it initially, and it was a really raw point that stung really hard. But then here's the bit that's amazing. They're both aligned and wanting to move forward, right? The relationship was strained, having lost the home, but Becky was very stoic through a tough time, and props to her. And it took a massive toll on their trajectory. But I want Billy and Becky and everyone here to know that this is a good news story.
Finishes positively.
It's very, very positive on the background of something that was a dark day for them. Now, here's where further upside comes, Ben. It's not one and done. It's a living, breathing evolution of the planning process, because with some of that clarity and some of that sense of purpose and some of that renewed self-esteem for this couple, well, then their business might start to thrive even more, which means that they might get more income that comes in, which means that they can pay down debts faster. So it's not never, ever are we saying that those goals can't be achieved for upgrading the home. But what we are saying is, based on where we are now, here's a believable plan with a North Star that you can follow that can get you excited every day about what you're doing and help you forget the past. Inheritances, lotto wins, business success, all those sorts of stuff, gets factored in from this point forward. So I just wanted to really sort of lean into that for the community. It is something that you want to include, transcend and include always. It's like when you get your phone, Ben, every now and then you get to upgrade the software and something new happens. We want to encourage everyone who's ever had a plan with us, and everyone who's considering and everyone who's creating their own plan, to understand you're making decisions based on what you have right now in the moment. but you're always looking to ratchet and iterate over time based on you trapping more surplus than you'd plan to, based on getting more income than you'd plan to, based on having resources that were available. But the idea is you're ratcheting up, Ben, and avoiding, and the whole idea of ratcheting means that there's no big drop and fall back to the ways of the past.
Yeah, you're looking at your instrument panel as you're driving towards this future direction and the plan that you've created, and you're checking in on those instruments. All of a sudden, to your point, if there's more income coming in, there's more fuel in the car, so we can go further, or we can basically increase our acceleration and get to that destination a little bit quicker. You're looking at the debt instruments, you're looking at the cash flow trapping, you're getting yourself, you're looking at your oil temperature, you're looking at the way in which the engine's performing, and ultimately from that you can then adjust course. You can speed up, slow down accordingly. And I think that's, the plan is that starting point. It gives you the roadmap to the destination that you're on. And then you continue looking at wealth speed, wealth clock, passive income, spending habits, debt reduction. All of those things are part of the gauges that we have available in terms of you continuing to tick off, those kilometres along the journey to get to the end destination.
Well done, folks. Well done, Billy. Well done, Kylie. It's you guys should be really stoked with yourself.
Yeah, you should be proud of yourself, guys,
for doing that. I'm super impressed, and I just want to remind everyone of the Association of Super Funds of Australia, Ben, the ASFA's estimate of how much money you'll need in retirement, depending on your lifestyle. For a couple, modest is $46,994. For a couple, comfortable, it's $72,148. If you're single, modest, it's $32,665. And if you're single, comfortable, it's $51,278,000, Ben. That was as per the December quarter of 2023, so it's about 6 months old. Now, here's a couple of definitions for everyone. The modest standard estimates how much is needed for the basics. The comfortable standard estimates how much money is needed for retirees to be involved in a range of leisure activities and have a good standard of living, including private health insurance, a reasonable car, household goods, and holidays. So just the reason I brought that up, Ben, is both of these particular couples' plan was to have $90,000 in passive income. So the comfortable standard was 72. So they're what's that? It's going to be an extra almost 30% greater than the ASFA standard, just because they made a change and got what they wanted.
About $400 a week, Bros.
Yeah, it's enormous. So, folks,
material.
$2,000 per week will get you into a position that gives you way more choices than a lot of people will be having. So, props to you. So, well done to both of these case studies. Thanks for Polly and Stu for sharing them. And again, Ben, I'm just going to go back to my meta themes for what we won. First one with James and Becky, the meta theme was not all lifestyle design is measured in dollars. And then the second meta theme that we had for Billy and Kylie was what is the true price of get rich quick schemes? Hopefully we unpacked a little bit of that for the folks, Ben, listening to this, that there is a cost that comes from that and you don't want to be stung from it. So very good. Hey, my life hack today is an extension of some of the stuff we were talking about at Mindset Minute, Ben, in our opening banter. And Paul Marinelli sent this to me on Instagram, and I thought it was pretty good. And it really ties into what we're chatting about today. But it was a Instagram reel, and it said this: what does it take to blow $10,000 in 1 year? Ben, I don't know. Is it a holiday? Is it a couple of big screen TVs or no? Just $27.40 a day in miscellaneous spending. It's not the big purchases that hold you back from saving money. It's the small ones that you think won't make a difference. Thank you, Paul, for sending that through.
Yeah, lovely.
I think it's really, really timely for the conversation that we're having today, that the enemy is never the big purchases, because you usually put a lot of time and effort into that. The enemy is always the tap and go. The tap and go is the enemy of everyone's budget. It's the enemy of everyone's surplus. It's the enemy of everyone's ability to create a meaningful lifestyle by design. Because if you did analyze most of those tap and goes, Ben, most people would probably agree that 9 out of 10, they could have just gone, I didn't get any utility or benefit out of it. It was just because I could that I did it. So there you go, folks. Remember that blowing $10,000 in 1 year equates to $27.40 a day in miscellaneous spending. Ben, what's making property news?
Well, just on that point, Bryce, that's the unconscious overspending that we talk about in Money Smarts. So living a lifestyle account will stop all of that sort of stuff from happening. So there's another
7-day
little tip.
float is the way that you
That
get
is it.
around that, folks. What's making
Now,
property
what's
news,
making
mate?
property news, Bryce? We've got just a quick story here. It was interesting to see that the CBA, and for context, the CBA has a significant market share. Commonwealth Bank of Australia has a significant market share, and they released a bit of intel, which I thought was quite interesting around property investors. And right now, what they're seeing is the millennials have become the most active generation of investors, with about 1 in 3 properties being bought by millennials. So this whole concept that it's hard to save for a deposit and get into the property market is actually being a myth that's being busted by the actions of these people. Now, how they're doing that is potentially through part of rent vesting. So they're still living at home, but potentially buying an investment property in that entry-level space. And we absolutely know from our own experiences in the field that there's a lot of activity happening in that entry-level space where, you're talking in that sort of anything really from $400,000 to $700,000 is very actively fought over based on the lending capacities, borrowing capacities pushing everyone into that market. We've been saying that for a long period of time. So right now, the Commonwealth Bank say that 46% of new property investments customers that they're receiving are people who are millennials who were born between 1981 and 1996. Now, that makes a fair bit of sense to me because also that they should be active now because we said, it's the power of time in the market that actually gives you that compounding benefit. So great to see them getting the baton handed over to them and getting active in the property space. The second biggest, if you're interested, is still the Gen Xs and other people born between 1965 and 1980. So that includes Bryce and I, and we still account for 37% of investment purchases. So if you think about it, those two particular markets account for almost, upwards of 90% of the activity that's happening in the marketplace at the moment. And so it's never too late to start for those people who are Gen Xers, and certainly for millennials, now is an excellent time to be thinking about what you're doing about building a passive wealth strategy over time. So I thought that data was quite good. And the other obviously big trend that we're seeing is the idea of borderless investors. It's becoming more and more popular to buy interstate using obviously a growing number of buyers agents that are popping up all over the place, and certainly investment advisory businesses. Now, I started in this industry some 20 odd years ago. So it is interesting to see the amount of proliferation that's happening, and that's great. Obviously, if more people can get out there and do the work, I always believe in abundance, so it's a great opportunity. I just give you one warning, from a consumer point of view, that if you're working with a buyer's agent and they are buying a property interstate, just ask them if they're licensed to buy in that jurisdiction. So under the Real Estate Agent Licence Act, you need to be a fully licensed real estate agent or a representative of a fully licensed real estate agent of the state in which you're buying. If you're not, then technically they are breaking their rules of their license. And I don't know what the ramifications would be, but I wouldn't like to be in that position if there is ever any contested purchases or from those buyers agents who might be listening to this pod. If you're not licensed in that particular state, be very, very careful because you could lose your opportunity to actually run your business in the state that you are licensed in, because we are definitely seeing a lot of activity in this space, and we don't think that a lot of people have got their appropriate licenses to do the work that they were doing. So a little bit of a flag when you are talking to buyers agents out there, just make sure that they are qualified and able to buy in that particular state.
Well said, Ben. Thank you for that. And it just goes to show that the narrative around millennials not being able to get onto the property ladder is only available at headline level, because those who actually just get on with it, Ben, we know heaps of them. We know heaps of millennials who are getting on with it, getting into the marketplace. So well done. Just a quick shout out to say thank you to Billy and Kylie for sharing their story. You guys are winners. Super excited. And Stu for curating and looking after and stewarding that particular couple. And of course, James and Becky Looking forward to July when we can stop driving trucks all the time. Ben, 1 week, one week on, 1 week off, and of course Polly for stewarding that particular couple as well. So, which is brilliant, mate. And thanks to you for contributing as you always do to bring the lessons to our community. So hopefully there's some takeaways, mate. But until next week.
Well, right back at you, Bryce. Thank you for guiding the conversation and also adding your wisdom. But until next week, knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it. Oh, almost stumbled on that one, didn't I?
Almost stumbled. See you next week, folks.